Did she
You
have a
don't just
ghetto
have a.
accent?
I'm gonna be
She
like this
didn't.
all
She
the
was more
time.
on like
So
the good side, like of like she was more on like the gritty.
Then let's add a description. For the description of your card, type in what you do for a living, or if you're a student, what are you studying? For me personally, I make YouTube videos. And add a hobby of yours. I make YouTube videos and play video games. So far, so good. Let's import our card component just to be sure that it's working. Within our app component, I will at the top our card component just to be sure that it's working. Within our app component, I will at the top import the name of the component, card, from a file location. These files are right next to each other. So I will type ./card.return. Type the name of the component. These are typically in pairs. You need an opening tag and a closing tag. And there's our card so far. We'll be applying some CSS styling momentarily. There is a shortcut in place of using an opening and closing tag. Take the opening tag, end it with a /. That's also valid. Let's head back to our card component. We'll include an image. Within our opening image tag, it is good practice to set the alt attribute, just in case this image can't be displayed, or if somebody is using a screen reader, the alternate text will be displayed, or read out loud. We'll include a profile picture for us. Let's set the alternative text to be profile picture. We're going to set the source attribute. Now, I recommend pausing the video and finding a profile picture of yourself from, Facebook or Twitter or whatever you use for social media. Pick a smaller picture. Something around 200 by 200 pixels would be decent. If you don't want to follow along, you can include a placeholder image just for this lesson, which you can get from this site. This will be an via that will give you a placeholder image. Otherwise, if you have an place from our card class, we will import that image. Import. Then we need a name. Do is place this image within our assets folder. From our card class, we will import that image. Import. Then we need a name for this import. I'll name my import profile pic from a location. So we need to navigate to the assets directory, then get our image. The assets directory / the name of the image. So mine is profile and it's a JPEG. Yours is likely going to be different. Do pay attention to that. Profile.jpg. For the source attribute, I will set this equal to a set of curly braces. Then we will include our profile pic that we're importing. I will set this equal to a set of curly braces. Then we will include our profile pic that we're importing. There's my profile picture. Depending on the dimensions of your profile picture, it might be fairly big. You may want to choose a smaller image, or otherwise within our CSS file, we can change the dimensions of the picture. Okay, let's head to our CSS style sheet. We already do have some global CSS properties already applied, but I'd like to start fresh. Let's delete everything within the CSS style sheet. That should eliminate all CSS within our web page. We will select the name of the class, card. Remember that with JSX, we use class name, not class. Within our index CSS real quick, we should already have some experience with CSS. Okay, let's add a border. Border, 1 pixel solid. I'll pick a light gray color. Let's set the lightness to about 80 for the border. I'll set the border radius to be 10 pixels to round the corners. The corners should now be rounded, as you can see here. I'll add a box shadow. The first value is for the horizontal offset. The second is for the vertical offset. The third value is for the blur radius. I'm going to pick a lighter color though. So I'm going to select black. The second is for the vertical offset. The third value is for the blur radius. I'm going to pick a lighter color though. So I'm going to select black, change this to an HSL value. But I'm going to change the transparency to be 10%. So 0.1. That is not bad looking. Okay, let's add a little bit of padding. 20 pixels. Padding is found between the elements and the border. So if I were to increase this, we have more padding, but let's stick with 20. I'll add some margin. Margin is for the space outside of the border. Let's go with 10 pixels. I'll text align center to center the element. Within. Text align center. I'll set a max width for the card to be 250 pixels. Then I will set the display to be an inline block. In case we have more cards, they'll at least flow within our container if we have more. Because normally divs are block level elements. Okay, so let's work on the card image next. We'll head back to our card component class. We'll add a class name to the image element. Class name equals CSS style sheet. Then image. Go back to our CSS style sheet. Say card image. Go back to our CSS style sheet. We are accessing our card class, then access the card image class within. I will set a max width. I will set a max width to be 60% of the width available. I will set the height to be auto, to automatically resize. If you would like a circular image, you can set the border radius to be 50%. I'll add a little bit of margin on the bottom with margin bottom 10 pixels. All right, let's work on our title next. Going back to our card component, let's add a class name. The class name will be card-title. Going back to our CSS, card-title. Going back to our CSS style sheet, we will select our card class, then select the card title class. With my card title, I will set a font family to be pick a font. I like Arial. I'll set a backup of sans serif in case Arial can't be displayed for some reason. I'll set margin to be 0 to remove any margin. I'll set the text color too. We'll set the color property to be pick a color. Again, I'm using HSL values. I'll set the lightness to be 20%. Now let's change our card text. Going back to our card component, within our paragraph element, we will set the class name to equal card-text. Going to our CSS style sheet, we will access the card class, then access the card-text class. I'll set the font family to be Arial as well. And I will change the color. I'll set the lightness to be 40%. Again, I'm using HSL values. Maybe 30. I would say that looks decent enough. We have now created and styled a card component. Within our app component, we can reuse the card component. However, if I were to add another, well, JSX elements must be wrapped in an enclosing tag. Within our app, we have now created and styled a card component. Within our app component, we can designed to return a single. It's an empty set of angle brackets. Then technically, we're only returning a single element. We now have 2 cards. However, they are identical though. And we can use this card component whenever we want. I can include 4 if I would like. Alright everybody, so that is us making a card component. In the next video, I'll discuss props, where each component can have different values, because we don't want all of our components to look the same. And that was some React practice by making a card component. Yo, what's going on, everybody? Everybody, so in today's video, I'm going to show you a few ways in which we can style React components with CSS button. We like function-based component, so then we will return. Normally, when setting a CSS class, you use the keyword class button from its location /button.jsx, and now we have a button component to work with. There's my button. Let's begin with external CSS styling. We should already be a little familiar with it already. Heading to our index CSS style sheet, we can apply some global styles. We will select the class name of button, dot to select a class, button. Let's apply the following CSS properties, but feel free to make any changes or alterations. I will begin with a background color. I've already pre-picked a color. Then let's change our cursor by 20. For padding, let's say 10 pixels by 20 pixels. Border radius to round the corners, I will set that to be 5 pixels. Border none to remove the border. Then let's change our cursor to be a pointer when we hover over the button. That's not a bad looking button. I am zoomed in to like 300% just for this demonstration. Alright, we have utilized an external CSS style sheet. They're easy to use for simple projects, such as making a YouTube video tutorial. It gives you flexibility with media queries and when you have more computers. You can use external style sheets to apply global styles throughout your web application. However, using external style sheets can lead to naming conflicts, especially when you have more components and classes to work with. If you have a large web application, you'll likely have all sorts of different buttons. You would need a strong naming convention and good organization. 2 buttons you may create might have the same class name by mistake. And with large applications, it might be difficult to keep track of all the different class names. Moving on to method 2, let's cut all of these properties, save. We're going to create a module now. That's the second method to create. Might have the same class name by mistake. And with large applications, it might be difficult to keep track of all the different class names. names. Moving on to method 2, let's cut all of these properties, save. We're going to create a module now. That's the second method. We'll create a dedicated CSS style sheet specifically for each component. What you may see some developers do is they'll create a new folder specifically for their component. Let's create a new folder, which we will name button, the name of our component. Let's move our button component to the button folder. Let's move it. Be sure to update any imports as well. My app component is now importing the button component from the button directory. Within our button folder, we'll create a new file. This will be a CSS style sheet, which we will name the name of the component, in this case button.module.css. Let's paste all of those properties that we cut before. Now from our button component, we will need to import this module. At the top, we will import styles from the location of that module, /button.module.css. For our class name, we will use a set of curly braces to use a dynamic value. Our class name will equal our import of styles dot the name of the class, button. And there's our button again. The nice thing about modules is that it avoids naming conflicts because a unique class is going to be generated for you via a hashing algorithm. If I were to right-click on this button and go to inspect, this class name is unique. It's generated via a hash. So with modules, we don't have to worry about naming conflicts. Modules are also convenient if each component has its own unique style. However, a few of the downsides though with using modules is that it does require additional setup, and global styles aren't applied easily. You would have to import them from elsewhere, and that's a whole thing. Let's remove our button component from the button directory. Let's put it back in source. And delete our button directory. Going to our button component, then remove the import as well. We don't need that anymore. Now we're going to use inline styles. What you see some people do is they'll create a JavaScript object named styles. Styles equals a set of curly braces for an object. Let's paste all of those CSS properties. We're within JSX code right now. We can't use any dashes. We'll switch to a camel case naming convention. All values should be strings. Each property should be comma separated. Let's remove our class name. We will set the style attribute to equal, use a set of curly braces to insert a dynamic value. We will insert our styles object that contains all of these CSS properties. And now we have done inline CSS styling. Inline CSS styling is convenient and easy to understand. It prevents global style conflicts because we're not working with class names. It's great for isolated components with minimal styling, such as a like button or a subscribe button. It's not great for sneak styling. Use object with these. They're readable. Today I gotta explain props. Props, short for properties, they're read-only properties that are shared between components. A parent component can send data to a child component. When you include a component within a parent, you can send that child component key-value pairs. In the last video, we made cards, but all of our cards were identical. Using props, we can send a child component individual values so that they're all unique. Let's go over an example. We're within our app component. I will create a new component. Let's go to our source folder, go to new file. We will create a component for students to display student data. Student.jsx. We need to create a function student, parentheses, curly braces, then don't forget to export default the name of the component, student. In order for this component to accept props, this function needs a props parameter. Props is going to be a JavaScript object. So let's add our return statement. We'll include a few HTML elements. We'll start with a div. Within our div, I will include a paragraph element. Within our paragraph, we'll add the text name, colon, space. We'll include a set of curly braces to inject some JavaScript. Let's take our props, this is an object, access the name property. However, we still need to pass in a value for the key name. So heading back to our app component, we need to import the student component. Let's do so at the top. Import student from the location where the student file is found. /student.jsx. Let's include a student component within our app component. Student Now, if I would like to send some data to my student component, student is going to be the child in this case, app is the parent, we'll need to list key value pairs. The key will be name equals some value. For the value associated with the name key, let's say SpongeBob. When I save and update everything, we have the name SpongeBob. When we send key value pairs to a component, they're all stored within this props object. To get the value associated with the key, you type props dot the name of the key. That will give you the associated value. On my webpage, I'm going to zoom in a little bit just so you can see it. That's good for now. Heading back to our app component, let's send another see it. That's good for now. Heading back to our app component, let's send another key value pair. Let's send an age. If you're going to store some data as a value, if it's not a string literal, you got to enclose it within curly brace component in a little bit just so you can. That will give. That's good for now. Let's create a new paragraph. Age, colon, space. To include some JavaScript, we got to use a set of curly braces. We are accessing the props object. Dot, access the key of age. SpongeBob's age is 30. Okay, let's send is student. Is SpongeBob a student? We'll create a key of is student equals, add a set of curly braces. Is student will be a Boolean, true or false. SpongeBob is in boating school currently, he is a student. Let's save. Heading back to our student component, I'll include a new paragraph. Student, colon, space, curly braces, props, dot, is student. SpongeBob is a student, that is true. However, our Boolean is not displaying. So with a Boolean, I recommend using the ternary operator. If is student within props is true, then we'll return a string literal of yes. Otherwise, we'll return a string literal of no. Let's update everything. Yes, SpongeBob is a student. You can place complex JavaScript code within your HTML code. Booleans don't display directly to the DOM. You typically find them used within ternary operators or some sort of conditional. If some value is true, return or do this. If not, do something else. Now, if I were to pass in a Boolean value of false, well, that will change to no. SpongeBob is not a student. Let's change that back to true. Now, before I include a few more components, I'm going to do a little bit of CSS styling, just so that all of this is going to be more readable. I'm going to zoom out to 100%, where it was originally. Within my student component, within the enclosing div element, I will set a class name. Remember that with JSX, you have to use class name, not class, because class is a reserved keyword. Let's name this class student. Then heading to our CSS style sheet, index.css, feel free to clear out anything within here. I will select the class of student. I'll change the font family to be Arial. I'll add a backup of sans serif in case Arial can't deter value of any. Then access. That's not too bad. So this is a student component to display some student data. We'll reuse the student component, but pass in different data each time. We'll create a new student component. This student's name is the student component. This is a student component. Component to define sex data. Name Pat equals 50. Then let's add Sandy. Int true. We have a console, mostly for debugging purposes. If you're working with props, it is good practice to also use. Alright, we have created 4 student components. Each has different values depending on what we pass into props. We're going to move on to prop types. Prop types. Prop types are a mechanism that ensures that the passed value is of the correct data type. For example, within props we have an age. We would like to ensure that the age value passed in is a number, not a string or a boolean. If it isn't, then React can emit a warning within our console, mostly for debugging purposes. If you're working with props, it is good practice to also use prop types. So here's how to create prop types. After our student function, we'll type the name of the component, student, dot, prop types, equals, curly braces. Now we types, port, like to ensure that within age will be a number, be a type. Let's say I pass in a string of within our console. If we write a warning, the student, expected number, and here's a location. So this is good for debugging. It won't stop the application from running, just issue a warning. It is good practice to include prop types if you're accepting props. Then lastly, we're going to discuss default props. Default props are default values for props in case they are not passed from the parent component. Let's say we create a new student component, but we don't pass in a name. We can add a default value, such as guest, just in case that value isn't passed in one way or another. Okay, let's add default props down here. Student dot default props equals set of curly braces for this student will component false. To test this, let's go to our app component. We'll create a new student component, but don't pass in any props. We'll create an empty student component with no props. That appears to work. The name is guest, the age is 0, student is set to no. So if I were to include a name, let's say name equals Larry. Well, Larry's name is going to be set. We didn't include any key value pairs for age or is student. We ended up using the default values, 0, the name just in case that value isn't passed in one. One way or another. Okay, let's add default props down here. Student dot default props equals default value will be false. We'll create a new student component, the age. Alright everybody, so those are props. They are read-only property values. So if I were to name a new student will be false. To test this, let's go to our app component. students get the name. Well, we ended up using the default values. 0 is that are shared between components. A parent component can send data to a child component. When you include a component, you can send that component key value pairs, which allows you to reuse that component but have unique data. And those are props with React. Hey, what's up everybody? In today's video, I'm going to give you an introduction to conditional rendering in React. Conditional rendering allows you to control what gets rendered in your application based on certain conditions. By utilizing conditional rendering, we can show, hide, or change components. Here's an example. We'll create a user greeting component. Let's go to our source folder, new file, user greeting, and this will be be a JSX file. I will be using function-based components. Function, the name of the component, user greeting. We will have one parameter, Props. We learned about props in the last video. Before I forget, I'm going to export default the component name, just so that we can import it later. Heading back to our app component, we will return a user greeting component. User greeting. By using props, we'll send two key value pairs to our user greeting component. Is logged in. This will be a Boolean value. We'll check to see if we're logged in or not. And a username, Boolean value. We'll check to see if we're logged in or not. And a username. Username equals, this is a string, so we do not need a placeholder. Type in your name or username. Then we do need to import user greeting. Import user greeting from a location dot / user greeting dot pairs that are stored within our props object. I'll use an if statement to check to see if we're logged in or not. If props is an object, we will access props followed by dot is logged in. Is this true or not? If it is, then let's return an h2 element with text of welcome. I'd like to include some JavaScript. I'll use curly braces. Let's take props dot our username. Let's see if this works. Welcome, brocode, or whatever your name is. So what if we're not logged in? I will set is logged in to be false. Well, nothing appears to happen. Going back to our user greeting, let's add an else statement. Else we will return, please log in to continue. Within our function-based component, we can check some logic using an if statement. If some condition is true, return this. If not, return something else. Now, technically, you don't need the else statement. You could just say return. Because when you return, you exit. This would work too. As you can see. I don't think it's as explicit as using an else statement. Another option is to use the ternary operator, which we learned in JavaScript. We will return check props dot is logged in. Add a question mark. Is this true or is it false? If it's true, then we'll return an h2 element that says welcome. I'll add some JavaScript. Props dot username. I'm going to close this menu just so we can see. If this condition is true, return this. Otherwise, add a colon. We'll return something else. We'll add an h2 element. Please log in to continue. This statement is pretty lengthy. I'm going to put each part of the statement on a new line, just so we can read it easily. If is logged in is true, return this h2 element. If not, return this h2 element. Currently we're logged in. That is true. If I set this to be false, well then we get that login prompt. Please log in to continue. You'll more commonly see people use ternary operators rather than if-else statements, just because they're more concise. Let's apply some CSS styling. We'll add em is our second colors. Next, with another instance, include any instance. I'm gonna copy this first h2 element. We'll store that within our welcome message. Just so we can read it, I'm going to place each line on a new line. Well then, we're logged in. Welcome, if I surname, verbose. Here's another way in which we can use the ternary operator in this situation. Let's create two constants. Const, the first will be welcome message. Be sure not to include any dashes though. Separately, we'll store these h2 elements. I'm gonna copy this first h2 element. We'll store that within our welcome message. Just so we can read it, I'm going to place each line on a new line. Then let's create another constant. Const login prompt. Be sure to eliminate any dashes. We will be using a camel case naming convention. Take our second h2, cut it, paste it, and there we go. I find that a lot easier to read. Otherwise, we'll return our other constant, our login prompt, and that will work still the same. Let's set that to be false. Please log in to continue. Set it back to be true. Welcome your username. I find this syntax a lot easier to read. Now, it is good practice if you're accepting props to set up prop types. Just in case the values that are passed in are not of the correct data type, you'll at least get a warning for debugging purposes. It's a good habit that we should develop. We learned about prop types in the last video. So at the top, let's import prop types. That's capital T. User name. The last thing we're going to do is set up default props. What if somebody's logged in, but they don't have a username? We'll set a default for these props. Prop will to our app component. If a user is logged in, but there's no username, let's eliminate if a user is not logged in. Regardless, we don't display the username. Alright everybody, so that's conditional rendering. You can check some sort of condition. Based on if that condition is true or false, we can show, hide, or change components. There's many different ways in which you can do that. And well everybody, that is an introduction to conditional rendering in React. Hey everybody.